Live via satellite, it's Rockline. The show where you interview the biggest stars in rock and roll. Rockline is brought to you by The Simpsons on Fox. Hi, I'm Bob Coburn in Los Angeles, and tonight we welcome Genesis from London, featuring Mike Rutherford and Tony Banks. This is one of our rare shows where, due to scheduling and time constraints, we pre-recorded the interview with me and the band. But I'm sure you'll find this to be compelling, informative, and entertaining. And now let's introduce our guests. And let's welcome to Rockline our guest. First of all, Mike Rutherford. Welcome back to Rockline, Mike.
Thank you very much. Good to be on.
Good to have you again. And Tony Banks as well. Hi, Tony.
Thank you as well. Yes, nice to be on.
You guys have a box set forthcoming, Genesis Live, 1973 through 2007. The release date is September 29th here in the United States. I believe that's correct. Is that correct?
As far as we know, yes.
So this is based, what's forthcoming, on the 4 live albums that the band released, correct?
Yes, primarily, and with one or two, with some extra stuff in there as well.
Yeah, there's some bonus material and things that were done at different locations, the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles, and it's really interesting to listen to. The performances are outstanding, and whoever did the actual digitizing and remastering and all that did a really good job. How involved are you guys in something like that?
Well, to some extent, we're quite involved, really. I mean, this is Tony speaking, and I'm probably a bit more involved than anybody else in the band. Maybe I've got more time on my hands, I don't know. Or maybe I just care a bit more. But it's been the main force behind it all has been this guy, Nick Davis, who was the producer-engineer on the last couple of Genesis albums, We Can't Dance and Calling All Stations. And he's been involved in all the remixing and everything we've done of all early material, all the box sets and everything, because obviously we've done all the studio material before this, and now this is the live albums. But I've tended to sort of be there all the time to kind of listen to every track after it's done or during the time it's done, and if I feel changes need to be made, which, you know, most of the time it's fine, but there are times when you have to make quite radical changes. I'm there to sort of try and be the voice of the group, and I try to listen to things. I don't try not to say just more keyboards all the time, you know, just tempting, but and try and think about guitars and drums and everybody else as well. Now, I've got quite good at that, I think. So, you know, you try to listen to the thing as an audience member and make certain everything you want to be heard is being heard.
None of us would have a problem if you said more keyboards.
Well, but hang on a minute. This is Mike here.
Perhaps
not a big problem.
With the possible exception of Mike.
Well, the possible exception of Peter and Steve and, you know, and Phil and everyone. No, it's, you know, it's sometimes. There are times, actually. I think a couple of times I feel Nick has actually sort of purposely put the keyboards down a bit so that I have to come in and say, well, more keyboards, Nick, you know, just so that I kind of feel that I can say that. Because there are a couple of times when you need to go up. But often it's the guitar, often it's the voice, you know.
So the 14 studio albums have been re-released. They've been kind of bundled in groups, the Peter Gabriel era, and then after that. And these live albums, that will mark the end of the re-releasing on Rhino, I guess, huh?
I think so, yeah. Finally. I mean, I think there's going to be possibly a DVD one of all the sort of videos and stuff. But, you know, I sometimes think, is it the right thing to do to kind of repackage all this stuff? But actually, when I hear, you know, some of the early material, same with the live and same with the studio albums, we mixed them very fast. We recorded very fast. There was a deadline, a budget. And so to go back and actually do it with a bit more time, a bit more patience, and a bit more understanding of how to make it sound better without trying to be too clever, I think has made the whole thing worthwhile.
Well, I took the liberty of A-Bing some things and comparing them, and the difference is remarkable between the original releases and what this box set sounds like. I think it was a great move, actually, because it really brings out a lot of subtlety in the music that I had not heard before. And the 5.1 mixes are fantastic, too.
Well, I think 5.1, you know, was the original motivation for doing all this was because of the existence of 5.1. And when we did the studio albums, we did them in SACD and in DVD, but I know that SACD isn't so popular in the States. But that's probably is the prime format. But the DVD is you just get the width of the sound. You know, a lot of the time, particularly on the studio albums, there are lots of overdubs, and you could separate it all out. And in the case of the live albums, you can make it more like a live experience. You've got ambience you can put in so that it sounds like it's coming from everywhere. So you don't make it sound like a really bad hall. You make it sound like the best hall possible. And the result, I think, can really sound like a live show. There was a great room for improvement, particularly on the early albums. I mean, when we did that very first Genesis live album, it was really done originally as a radio show. We didn't remix it for the album or anything. It was just, we weren't very happy with the result, and we didn't sort of, in all honesty, take as much trouble over as we probably should have done. So coming back to it, we're able to do a bit more. But I think in many ways the most exciting CD in this collection is the one that comes from a year after the original Genesis Live album, which was Genesis Live at the Rainbow.
Well, let's begin musically with something live at the Rainbow from 1973. I Know What I Like on Rockline. We just heard I Know What I Like by Genesis. We're with Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford and Bob Coburn. We'll take a brief time out and return to Rockline in just a moment. And welcome back to Rockline. I'm Bob Coburn, joined by Mike Rutherford and Tony Banks. And we are talking about the forthcoming release of the live albums that have been remastered and retouched and sound just absolutely fantastic. As we were discussing with the gentleman a few moments ago, the studio albums have been done. They were packaged 1976 through 1982, 1983 through 1998, and the Peter Gabriel era as well, 1970 through 1975. These albums that contain the material with Peter Gabriel, those concerts, did he need to sign off on those, or did you just do them on your own?
Well, he came down actually, and when we talked to him about it, I said, "Do you want to, do you want to be involved?" And he said, "Yes." And he came down, and Mike, Peter, and I, we listened to all the stuff that was possibly available, which included this Rainbow concert. And we thought, well, it's interesting stuff. We'd like to hear this, see what it's like. And yes, he signed off on it all. He's very happy with the result. I think he was quite surprised at how good some of that stuff sounded. Because a few of these tracks we really hadn't heard since we'd done them. There were one or two that have been used over the years in sort of like archive packages and things. But it was just, we came back to them. We thought actually, they sound exciting, and it was great fun to be able to find this concert that we didn't really remember too well. And actually have something that was sort of new and good to offer.
That's one of the things I was curious about. When you go back this far and you've played so many concerts and done so many albums over the years, how much do you remember of some of these early shows? Just bits and pieces here and there?
Well, I know it sounds kind of odd, but in a funny way, I think the early days you remember more because each venue was different, a bit odder, funny old theatres. When we got onto sort of the middle part of our touring career, playing arenas all around the world, they're all kind of the same. You go in there, you drive down below the building, it's breeze block, brick, you don't really know where you are. But some of these older theatres, the Rainbow Theatre, sort of quirky Scottish theatres, even North American theatres, you remember those venues, I think, a lot more. So the shows, I think, come back to me probably slightly stronger.
Mm-hmm. So later on in your career, when it's one arena after another and literally you can barely remember what city it is, those kind of meld together and blend into one?
Well, they do from the point of view of the actual sort of venue and stuff, I suppose. But obviously in terms of the musical content, there were one or two songs from the early period perhaps that we didn't remember that well. I mean, there's probably our most complicated song we ever did was a song called The Battle of Epping Forest, which is on one of these on that Rainbow show. And while we were listening to what the possible inclusion on this album with Peter and Mike and myself, we listened to that song, and we were all sort of very surprised by every bit as it came, because we hadn't listened to it for quite a while. And I'd done the studio version, I suppose, a year or two before, so I was more acquainted than the others. But I could see the sort of shock and surprise, particularly on Peter's face, as each bit came up there, And it's sort of where you wouldn't right now. I mean, we'd let each bit breathe a little bit longer, I suppose. But for all that, it's quirkiness, it's quite fun. And it's actually the fact that we played it live. I mean, it sort of stops and starts and does all this changes, and we all go in sync and all in gear, and it's quite impressive actually. Quite surprised that we could do it, but it's and I think it's fun to listen to. But it is something of a period piece, whereas some other pieces perhaps stand up, still perhaps slightly stand up at the test of time, slightly more than that.
That is noted as a previously unreleased track, and I've always loved that song from the album "Selling England by the Pound," the Battle of Epping Forest. It's an epic, to say the least, and this version turned out very, very well. The clarity and the definition is outstanding. It sounds really good. Let's play another song right now. This is actually Phil Collins singing on this version of "The Lamb Lies Down" on Broadway. It's Genesis on Rockline. And that is The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway by Genesis from the forthcoming box set, live 1973 through 2007. I mentioned that Phil Collins does the vocal in that. Years ago, 1975, I saw the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway tour at the Berkeley Community Theater up in the Bay Area and was absolutely astounded, gentlemen. I have to tell you, that's still to this day one of the greatest concerts I've ever seen. Was that fun doing all the theatrics and everything back then?
Well, it was quite. I think we were being quite brave at the time. I remember that North American tour, because actually, thinking of what was going on, right? We arrived there. The album hadn't come out. We played the entire 4 sides of a double album, so the fans were hearing the whole show of new music and a couple of hits at the end, old songs at the end. So at the time, it never occurred to us, but actually, it was quite a brave move. And I remember being amazed, looking back in a way, how well it was received, even from day one. If you're hearing the entire set of new stuff, it's quite hard. And I think in a way the visual side helped. It was quite interesting what we were doing, the slides and telling the stories. But I was still amazed how well it was received at the time on that tour.
I remember watching the concert. I did not feel good that night. I had the flu, and during the concert, the flu went away. I just felt fantastic watching it.
Miracle cure.
Absolutely. Music can cure all ills, very definitely. But I remember the theatrical aspect of it and seeing Peter on a ladder at one moment and then lying prone on stage singing while lying down, and just the costume changes and everything. It was a tour de force, literally. And I had forgotten that the album was not out at that point. That is a risky move, guys.
Yeah, well, it wasn't really intended to be that way. It's just that everything got delayed in terms of the release of the album, but that we couldn't change the tour dates and everything. From my memories of that tour, it was a kind of tough tour to play. I mean, because a lot of songs in that perhaps we wouldn't have chosen to play live had it not been part of the double album, which we felt we wanted to try and do the whole show. But in those days, I was playing a lot of piano songs having to play them on electric piano rather than on a grand piano, or rather than on a sort of proper acoustic piano. And there's no touch on some of those old pianos. It was very tough to play. I found it quite a stressful thing. And also towards the end of the tour, particularly from about halfway through, we knew that there was problems with Peter and he was going to leave and everything. So it wasn't really our happiest time, I have to be honest.
Was the admitted tension in the band back then something very palpable, or something kind of bubbling under at the time that you suspected might come to fruition?
Well, I mean, funny enough, thinking back of it, until you mentioned it, I kind of forgot what was going on at the time. You're right. No, I think the tour was kind of okay. Before the tour, during the album, the writing of it, Peter was going to leave at one point and then came back. And to be honest, although I think Tony Smith, our manager, knew, I didn't know till quite late on, till the European tour.
No, we didn't tell him.
Did you know?
Oh, yes. Well, we knew it. Actually, knew in Cleveland. I always remember because that hotel, that strange hotel in Cleveland, it was a kind of, it was a well-known kind of rock and roll kind of hotel in Cleveland at the time. It was a fun place to stay for that reason. And I had a room with orange walls, and I hate the colour orange, so I swapped with our manager, Tony Smith, because he said he didn't mind orange. And it was in that particular room that Peter then announced to Tony that he was definitely going to leave at the end of this tour. And that sort of was when I first sort of knew he was definitely going to go. We had talked about it before, and I thought, It was, it was a difficult time, really. He felt he had other things to do and wanted to move on, and it was a strange thing. So we were in the middle of that American tour, and then we still had loads of shows to do. And by the end, we actually cancelled the very last show of the tour.
We have to take a time out. We'll return in just one moment. We're with Tony Banks, Mike Rutherford of Genesis, and we'll return on Rockline in just a second. Rockline is brought to you by Fox. Fox Sunday, it's the season premiere of The Simpsons, also the season premiere of The Cleveland Show, and the premieres of Family Guy and American Dad. What a great premiere night. It's at 8, 7 Central, all new Fox Sunday. More of our interview with Genesis in just a moment on Rockline.
Eastern heroes got to scorn the battle. They've been forests. Yes, it's a battle. They've been forests right outside your door.
And welcome back to Rockline, our interview with Genesis. I'm Bob Coburn. We'll hear more from Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford in just a moment. Go to rocklineradio.com and check out who's coming up on the show. The Rockline calendar is brought to you by Spam.
Mac and cheese and Spam and delicious. Break the monotony. Spam.com.
Next week, we'll be joined by Leonard Skinnard. Lita Ford will join us after that. She has a hot new album, and we'll be listening to that with her. Foreigner will be on the show as well, along with Alice in Chains. And enter our contest, too, at rocklineradio.com. Ever been to Washington, D.C.? Well, we'd like to send you there on a great tour. We'll take care of the airfare and the hotel and all that. It's in honor of the Fox show Lie to Me, which is based in Washington, D.C. All you have to do is click and enter. It's really simple, all at rocklineradio.com. Time now for the Rockline Encore question from Ace Frehley.
Hey, this is Ace Frehley, and, people are always asking me whether or not I'm going to do a reunion show with Kiss. So I figured I'd ask you guys, are you ever going to do a reunion tour with Peter Gabriel?
Fair enough.
That's that question, isn't it? Well, everyone always asks this question. Well, we did talk about this a few years ago with Peter, and Peter at one point seemed quite keen on it. Actually, he was the one who almost instigated the possibility of it. But since then, he's gone kind of cool on it. And not just that, I think it's an unlikely thing to happen. We never say never. I think, in all honesty, Mike and I think probably would do it. We'd be happy to do it. I know Steve Hackett would be happy to do it. But, someone's got to... We've got our two kind of superstar vocalists and trying to convince them. I don't know. So I don't think it'll happen, no.
For me, it seems that Peter's really kind of gone into an area of non-interest in music in general, not just with Genesis. He really hasn't done anything as a solo artist in quite some time now.
Well, actually, you're about to be surprised. He's about to bring an album out.
I've been hearing that for 6 years.
No. That's the album. He's doing another album, which is going to do this year, called Scratch My Back.
I look forward to it.
Paul Simon song, and Paul Simon does a Peter Gabriel song. Peter does a Lou Reed song, and Lou Reed does a Peter Gabriel song. And that's sort of underway, I think, actually, quite far on. Quite a nice idea.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I can't wait to hear that. Talking about vocalists in the band, with Phil Collins, there's a note on your website, which is genesis-music.com, from Phil Collins about having some health issues, some vertebrae in his neck, and losing a bit of the touch and feel in his hands, and perhaps not playing for quite some time. What's the current update and status of his health?
Well, he can still sing. No, I'm kidding. Actually, this is Mikey. I saw him last Tuesday when he was sort of talking about it, actually, down at there was a day at Prince's Trust, at Highgrove with Prince Charles, and he had all the ambassadors for the Trust down there. And Phil was just talking to various people about it. He's had an operation on a trapped nerve in his back, and at the moment his snare drum hand, you can't really grip the stick properly. But, a bit of tape, you can wrap it up. He's still playing drums. No, I think he's really saying right now he can't play full drums, sort of, but who knows?
Back to touch and feel, speaking of Phil and what we just discussed. Tony, you alluded to something a moment ago, the difference between electric and a proper acoustic piano. I believe you said that the real difference is the feel that you get?
Well, we're talking about sort of this, you must appreciate we're talking here about sort of the 1970s and what was available, really, and the only pianos that produced anything approximating to a piano sound was sort of things like there was a Hohner pianette, and then there was the piano I used, an RMI piano, and it didn't have any kind of it had no ability, no touch on it. So you kind of, if you hit a note, doesn't matter how hard you hit it, it came out exactly the same. Whereas the things I'd written on the piano at the time, if you take a thing like Introduction to Firth the Fifth, which obviously I did play on stage using the electric pianos, but it was very difficult to play because it just, you can't get any kind of feel on it. I mean, it's not like sitting down on a piano and just sort of playing it and getting all the right emphasis. So it was a tough kind of tough thing to do. And when the Yamaha brought out the CP70, which came out in the sort of late 70s, that made such a difference to what I could play live, I think. And after that, the ability to play sort of more piano-based music was more practical. But it did mean that sort of when those songs, particularly from the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, things like Anyway and the Lamia and things like that, where the piano was quite a strong feature, it was they were very tough to play, and probably would have preferred not to had to play them had it not been part of the album.
How far have things evolved into 2009 in terms of keyboards and what they can do?
Well, it's fantastic now, really, what you can do. I mean, when I did the last tour, the sort of Turn It On Again tour, I mean, you can get so many things now. I mean, with the synthesizers that are available and the kind of keyboards that are available. I mean, the main instrument I used on that tour was a Korg Oasis, which had the ability to get a lot of the old sounds out of it. So I was able to get all the old kind of synth sounds I had used in the 70s. I could get something, similar to that out of it, as well as being able to get some more modern sounds and strings and voices and pianos and everything out of it with a proper touch. So, the ability to do songs like something like Ripples, for example, which we did on the tour, that last tour, I could actually use a sound that approximated to a grand piano much more closely. And so that, which is so different to play it on that than it is to, say, playing it on an electric piano.
You mentioned Turn It On Again just a moment ago from Three Sides Live. This is the remastered and new version of that for you on Rockline. Always one of my favorites, Turn It On Again, Genesis. We're joined by Mike and Tony from the band and discussing this forthcoming release, Genesis Live, 1973 through 2007. We discussed Peter Gabriel, possible tour a few moments ago. What's the future of the band hold with you and Phil at this point? You had the 2007 tour. Is that it, or is it Never Say Never once again?
Well, at the moment, nothing is planned at all. I would say never say never. Who knows how people feel in 5 years' time or not? It's something we really worry about. What was very nice on that tour 2 years ago was we kind of we grown a little bit apart through just time and lack of working together. And we had a great time on the tour musically, but also as friends. It kind of reminded us all how well we got on. We've had sort of 40-odd years of doing this, and very few really bad memories. So I think, in a sense, that's a very important part of what we've always done together as well.
That's a blessing, and sitting in my chair, that's one of the things that I hear about all the time is the chemistry and being able to live with one another on the road and the importance of that. At some point, there are no more secrets. You know pretty much everything there is about everyone else in the band, right?
Yeah, I mean, Tony Banks' bad habits. If I told you what he gets up to, I've
still got a few secrets. We've all still got secrets. To the point of, I think that half the secret is to sort of, you stay out of each other's kind of way if you have to, I mean, it's just knowing really where you can go and where you can't go, I think, a bit sometimes. If a person's in a certain, got a kind of look on their face, at that point to not try and sort of, push it too hard and things. I think it gets easier in a sense as you get older and you're less kind of prickly. You're more prepared to kind of, and I was pretty prickly, wasn't I?
Because Tony's been, I must say, he's an appalling flyer, Tony here, and he decided years ago to sort of shut up and get on with it over the years, and so you learn that actually after a gig, you should rush onto the plane and fly to the next city. Until he's had his first glass of sake, don't talk to him. Then he's fine.
Cold sake or warm sake?
Oh, it has to be warm. Warm sake. But when we used to fly after the shows, which we did on sort of perhaps more in the later years sometimes, that was the best for me really, because after you come off stage, to have a few drinks is sort of okay, I think. The difficulty really is when you're flying at 6:30 in the morning. It's more difficult to have a drink at that time, and it's not really very good if you've got to have a gig at the end of it as well. So you had to do everything sober, and I did. It was a middle period of Genesis in the 70s and 80s. I mean, particularly in the 70s, I think we were doing a lot of those kind of short hops, particularly in the States, where you kind of. And a lot of the flights ended up being sort of 2 or 3 hops to get from city to city. I remember one particularly from Toronto to Philadelphia or something that seemed to require about 5 hops on Allegheny Airlines, which was kind of well known for its pilots quite enjoying going up and down and things. So, I mean, I just did not like that at all. I had a sort of way of dealing with it, I think. I don't quite know. I just refused to let it stop me. I wanted to do this. I wanted to be in a group. I'm a bit better than I was.
Well, actually, you hit the nail on the head, absolutely. You're saying about, quirks on tour. Tony Banks with hot sake, fine. Give him cold sake. God, does he go off? Does he give the Stuarts a hard time?
No, I don't.
I find that some of the premium sakes, cold is more interesting sometimes, but, there's nothing like the warm going down the...
I'd take it cold. If that was all that's on offer, I'd have it cold.
I can't believe you mentioned Allegheny Airlines. I've flown that airline several times, once from Chicago to Roanoke, Virginia, with several stops, one of which I did not know was Tri-Cities, Tennessee, and I asked the attendant, where is that? And she said, I don't exactly know. I went, oh no. This is going to be a very, very long flight. Could I have a vodka on the rocks, please? Thank you very much.
Yeah, it is that kind of...
There was a point in the band with Peter leaving back in 75. Every band endures personnel changes. Yours have been relatively minimal. I mean, there were certainly some major ones early on there, but things settled in and became very steady and solid as the years went by. But when Peter left, were you fearful at all that the band was about to meet its demise?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's no question. We thought, you've got to be realistic. You think, hang on, the front man, who is, in most people's eyes, very much the main part of the band, is leaving. Although we knew what was left was still a strong writing team. You're not too confident to say, right, hey, we're great, we'll carry on. We thought maybe it's time to stop, definitely. But something about I think what helped us is the fact that some of the key live tracks on stage, especially instrumentally, were written by myself and Phil and Tony. So we thought, you know what? A large part of what the fans really like has come from us anyway, so let's just go in and write some music and see. So there was no sort of confident or carrying on. It was like, let's go in for a couple of weeks, write some songs, and it'll tell us whether we're going to be carrying on or not. And it was a great, fantastic first week, and we never kind of looked back.
The songwriting changed in the minds of many when it became the three of you, and without Steve and without Peter. There was some criticism leveled at the band that I always thought was unfair. I thought that you found and developed a new style that reflected the three of you. Then there were the diehard Peter Gabriel fans and those in the press who said they've gone commercial and this and that. How did you handle that, and did it really matter to you at all?
Well, I think, you have to kind of change over the years. We developed a kind of style, and I don't really think necessarily the changes happened, particularly with the personnel changes, I think we carried on. I mean, in many ways, our most difficult album, I think, was Wind and Wuthering, which was kind of like, obviously, two or three albums after Peter had left, and probably most musically complex album we did in a way. And then again, we obviously, even after Steve left, I think Duke had a lot of kind of quite extended instrumentals and everything. It was after Duke, really, or during Duke and after Duke. We thought, we've kind of done this a lot of times. We've done this. We start with something, then we reprise it later on, very long extended instrumentals and things like that. We thought, we got to the album Abacab, we thought, look, let's just look at things a bit differently, try and see if we can do something slightly different. And we tried to pare it all down a bit, not use quite some of the things that almost become Genesis cliches, like the sort of the big wide keyboards and the tambourines on the chorus and all the rest of it, and see how else we can do it. And Abacab was something of an experiment, which we felt sort of worked fairly well. And so after that, we sort of we developed that kind of writing. So it all changed. But I mean, I look at it as a kind of body of work, if you like, which contains some long songs and some short songs. And we had some long songs in the later days and some short songs in the earlier days as well. And I'm pleased with it all. Longs and shorts, absolutely. You mentioned Wind and Wuthering being challenging to play. That, for me, was one of the most challenging albums to listen to. And that's one of the things I've always enjoyed about Genesis, is the juxtaposition of the short 4-minute songs and then the more complex pieces, the 8, 9, and even 25-minute long songs. Why is Wind and Wuthering a challenge for you guys? Well, as I said, it was. I think it's a more difficult album. I mean, obviously you've got one or two more instant tracks. Obviously, Your Own Special Way, which is a kind of a more straightforward track, and Afterglow, which perhaps became, or something of a stage standard as well. But the songs like 11th Earl of Mar and One for the Vine and things like that, but kind of much more. They went through more changes, I suppose, in chord-wise. They did more things. I don't know, just the way I see it. And I think from the audience point of view, whereas Trick of the Tail, the album that preceded it, was kind of very easily received, I think, and something of a relief for some people after Lamb Last Night on Broadway. Winter and Wuthering was definitely a bit more complicated, a little more feminine, slightly more less direct album. And, for certain members of the audience, they like it best of all. Some other people felt, were quite happy when we then perhaps got a little bit more straightforward with, and then there were three. I mean, we just go up and down. It's just what you write, what you felt at the time, and then that was what came out. It's one of my sort of, I suppose, more favourite albums. I mean, I like it a lot, but it's it's not everybody's.
11th Earl of Mar is one of my favourite songs the band has ever done over the entire period of the band. Let's play another song from the forthcoming box set, Genesis Live, 1973 through 2007. This is Misunderstanding on Rockline. No misunderstanding what that song is. Genesis on Rockline from the forthcoming box set, Genesis Live, 1973 through 2007. Rockline is brought to you by Fox. Fox Sunday, it's the season premiere of The Simpsons, also the season premiere of The Cleveland Show, and the premieres of Family Guy and American Dad. What a great premiere night. It's at 8, 7 Central, all new Fox Sunday. More of our interview with Genesis in just a moment on Rockline.
105.7
Again, welcome back to Rockline and Bob Coburn. We're with Genesis tonight talking about the forthcoming release of Genesis Live, 1973 through 2007, multi-CD display, for lack of a better word, of the band's live albums, retouched, remastered, and sounding really, really good. We touched on this a moment ago, the fear of perhaps the band meeting its demise when Peter left and Phil comes in. How many vocalists did you consider before turning to Phil?
To be honest, not. I mean, we had a lot of tapes, and they came by record label and sort of publishers. We only had about sort of 5 or 6 down. It was quite hard, because in a sense, there were one or two sort of, I've forgotten who they were now, quite well-known people put forward. Didn't seem quite right. And looking back, I mean, what an amazing bit of luck we had, really. And the point was, anyone who came down to sing, Phil would kind of sing the song first, to kind of get them in the groove how to do it. And then they would sing it, trying out vocalists. And every time, Phil sounded better. So it kind of came naturally. The whole thing really was very unforced. Then after a while, we thought, well, let's try Phil on a couple of songs. And it sounded great. And then the whole thing sort of progressed from there.
Was he immediately comfortable with it, or was there a transition period for him of coming from the drum kit?
I think it was quite hard in a sense, because, I mean, Phil had initially, a very sort of pure voice, no kind of grit. Mm-hmm. Which was kind of worried us. So the first song he sang, I think, was Skunk, I remember, which needed some grit. And he did a pretty good job. And then after the album was done, we kind of thought, well, hang on, that's great, but will Phil ever leave the drums, We weren't sure he was. And then he kind of came in one day and said, you know what, I'll try to sing you on stage. And so it was a kind of a slow process, really. And the funny thing was, come the very first show, and Phil was more worried, actually not about the singing, because that was going great, but about the talking. Because Peter had been great in between songs, sort of chat and the sort of communication. So I think Phil was more worried about the between song chat than the songs. But I remember the first show in London, Ontario, in Canada, with Phil singing. And after the first sort of introduction, with his hand shaking, holding a bit of paper, and he was going to work. It was great.
I think those of us as fans took to Phil immediately. For us, there was no transition. It just seemed like the right thing to do. There's so many outstanding versions, live versions of songs that we know and love by Genesis on this forthcoming box set, and this is certainly one of them. This is Throwing It All Away on Rockline. nice stretch with that song, up to about 6.5 minutes. I'm throwing it all away. We're with Mike Rutherford, Tony Banks of Genesis on Rockline, and back to talking about the changes the band has been through and putting these live albums together. How did the dynamic in the band change? Peter leaving, Phil goes to vocals, ultimately Steve Hackett leaves, you have Daryl Sturmer, you have Chester back on the drum kit. Did the dynamic change that much? Did you have a personality thing to deal with?
I think in a funny way, the key thing really was actually it wasn't intentional that Peter and Steve left, but you know, being a 5-piece band, we were kind of oversubscribed. There were too many guys writing, there were too many ideas. We were kind of full up in a sense, and I think going from the 5-piece to the 3-piece actually made it easier. There was more space to get ideas out, to be, you know, 3 guys writing is in a band is actually, and probably hopefully quite good writers, is a lot. And 5 guys is probably too many. So I think in a way the natural progression down to 3 was probably always going to happen in a sense. And I think I felt a kind of relaxed change for the band because there was space, there was room. And I think also when there were 3 people sort of, you know, when there were 5 of us, you'd fight for how loud the keyboards were, Tony said, or the bass, or, you know, and I was the same. When there's 3 people, you kind of, there's more space anyway. I felt we were sort of slightly more generous in the way we approach things. And it kind of felt a lot more relaxed from then onwards, really.
And you all certainly had your moments on stage. That did not seem to be an issue, and that's one of the things that we love about the band, the longer songs, the stretched out solos. You're all such outstanding players. There's a hard rock band named Disturbed out of Chicago that did a cover of the song Land of Confusion. Have you heard that out of curiosity?
Yes, we heard it at the time. We heard it before we did the last tour, actually, and we just very slightly modified the way we did the chorus of the song as a result of that, just making it a little bit heavier. I thought the version was good, actually. I mean, it was, you know, it added, you know, it was a slightly different take on it. We enjoyed hearing it, actually, because you sometimes hear cover versions which you really don't get much out of, but I think they'd made it just a little bit harder and a bit heavier. But the song could take it. I mean, you know, there's a nice tune there and everything, and they brought it out well, I think.
I think that's the way you do a cover is, you know, it's faithful enough to sound like the original, but you put your own spin on twist on it and make it your own, so to speak. And they did that, as you said, Tony. They rearranged it enough and put a little more oomph in it. Do you have any favorite covers that people have done of your music over the years?
To be honest, we haven't had very many covers of our music. But the question I thought you were about to ask is, do you have any favorite covers? Because I actually think, I was driving a car about 2 days ago and I thought to myself, you know, a good question on the radio is always, what is your favourite cover version of a song? As in a very different cover version. Because normally they're similar, you know, Disturbed was actually great but quite similar. Certain cover versions, kind of, I'm saying like Joe Cocker, Little Help from My Friends, they're so different that it's almost barely the same song, but they're still great. And the question should be, how many versions, you know, of other songs that are really different can you think of?
So you're doing the interview now, yeah?
I'm asking you, yeah.
You're asking me?
I'm asking Tony Banks. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Tony Banks.
I would always go for Vanilla Fudge, I suppose, you know. You keep me hanging on. Yeah. There's something about, I suppose there's always the thing about slowing down a song. You take a song that's kind of been done sort of light and breezy and fast, and it was a good song by the Supremes and everything, but then you kind of slow it to a sort of half pace and you make it heavy and the whole thing, and it's just fantastic. And Peter and I used to love that song. It was kind of, we just listened to it all the time. It was just a fantastic version of what is it, you know, it brings something else out of the song, and it was, you know, I think it's really exciting. You mentioned the Joe Cocker, My Friends is obviously an example of that, because in fact they were talking, I read an article the other day about covers of Beatles songs, and to be honest there aren't that many good ones really, but that one is
the question should be, the question should be, name a cover that you like of a song that is so different you barely tell the original. And there aren't many, but the good ones are great.
Thank you so much, Mike, for helping me with the interview. I really appreciate that. Mike Rutherford stepping in and doing Bob Coburn's job this evening. I like that a lot, actually. We have to take a time out. We'll return in just a moment with more of Genesis and Rockline. And Rockline is brought to you by Fox. Fox Sunday, it's the season premiere of The Simpsons. Also the season premiere of The Cleveland Show and the premieres of Family Guy and American Dad. What a great premiere night. It's at 8, 7 Central. All new Fox Sunday. And we're back to Genesis on Rockline right after this.
I will follow you where you follow me all of the days and nights that no will be. I will stay with you.
Once again, welcome back to Rockline. I'm Bob Coburn. We're spending the evening with Genesis with Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford. Head to rocklineradio.com and check out the Rockline calendar, brought to you by Spam.
Breakfast, lunch, dinner. Break the monotony. Spam.com.
When you're there, you'll find out that next week Leonard Skinner will be on the show. Lita Ford joins us after that, as well as Foreigner and Alice in Chains. And don't forget to enter our contest at rocklineradio.com. Ever been to Washington, D.C.? Hey, we can take care of that for you. Enter the contest for Lie to Me. We'll put you on a great tour, take care of the airfare, the hotel accommodations. You'll be all set. A trip to the nation's capital just by going to rocklineradio.com and clicking a couple of buttons.
Hello, this is Mick Jones of Foreigner, and you're listening to Rockline.
And welcome back to Rockline. and Bob Coburn, joined by Mike Rutherford, Tony Banks. We're talking about the live CDs being re-released by Genesis, the box set that's coming out, and that will be in stores soon on September 29th. The website for the band is genesis-music.com, and this project is called Genesis Live 1973 through 2007. Will this be it for the re-releases? You've done the 14 studio albums and now these live albums, and that's pretty much it, isn't it?
I don't think there's anything left. The barrel has been scraped. Apart from as Mike mentioned before, the sort of the live videos, there's one or two things left in that, and those will sort of come out, I suppose. But in a way, what we're trying to do with this is trying to get what we think is the best versions possible of all our major albums and everything out there, I think. Some point, presumably, the box sets will kind of be abandoned, and it'll just be the individual albums will be available, I suppose, which I think is the other way. So that if people want them, would go for these new versions rather than the old versions, because I think, as I said, they're not designed to sort of sound radically different, but just a lot better. It's a difficult thing to describe unless you do a comparison of the two, I think. Just suddenly everything sounds more lively and everything. But this is pretty much the end, I think.
That doesn't surprise me. There's been so much with these re-releases, and it's been done so well, actually, by Rhino. Kudos to them for doing a great job with this. Ask both of you this question. We'll start with Mike. Is there a favorite period of the band for you, Mike?
You always tend to be honest, two periods come to mind. I mean, I always think the last couple of albums feel pretty good, because actually every time you felt you got better. My main period, really, I suppose, the first, when that time when Peter left and Phil came on the scene, I suppose because, it was a very unlooked for change, but in a way, change brings some kind of new energy. I think that first Trick of the Tail album felt pretty strong. It was a great, exciting, challenging time. We rose to the occasion. And the last two albums, I felt, was so easy and enjoyable to write. That those are my sort of two favourite times, really.
Tony?
Well, I'm going to give you two times as well, really. I mean, for me, the first time would have been in the sort of roundabout Foxtrot, I think, where I just felt that the group suddenly went on to a different level. We increased our audience, but I think with the song Supper's Ready in particular, and a few other bits and pieces on that album, we kind of developed our writing in a way that kind of, took us on to another level. Very exciting to play live. And, you really felt that you were sort of on the up. In England in particular, it just sort of the audience was kind of seemed to be sort of really behind us, and it was a very sort of rather sharper upward curve than the curve we have, which is a very exciting thing to be involved in, I think. But in terms of sort of musical point of view and everything, that period would go to the same one as Mike, really. That period when Peter first, just after he left, really, that Trick of the Tail was a wonderful album to make. It just felt so easier. I compare Lamb was tough all the way through, both the album and the concert. And Trick of the Tail just came very easily, and I think we were so pleased the way it turned out and everything. And the 2 or 3 albums after that, probably from that up, certainly up till Duke, it was the sort of period that I perhaps enjoyed the most. I feel we were all writing really well, and sort of anything was kind of possible, and I loved that.
For me, to this day, a Trick of the Tail would probably be at the top of the list. It would be hard for me to make a list of what I enjoy the most by you guys, because you've done so much over the years, and so much of it is different from other releases. But Trick of the Tail, I mean, you have the title track, you have Squonk, you have Dance on a Volcano, you have Los Endos, you have Robbery, Assault, and Battery. It just goes on and on and on. That truly is one of the great albums, not only for Genesis, but of rock and roll. And something you alluded to a moment ago, Mike, and that is with changes within the band. When someone leaves, it's not only the exit of that personality, it's the entrance of another personality coming in. So it's kind of a double change when something like that happens, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes think I'm not sure it would have lasted this long without those changes. Not because we wanted them, but because when it happens, you kind of gain a new dynamic all the time. I think all the changes sort of made us face a new challenge. And so suddenly the band's been going for like 25 years or whatever the time period was, has got a new challenge, which often, if you say the same forever, you can't get. So I think in a funny way, although not looked for, it turned to be probably quite a good thing.
This is the perfect song to end this interview with. That's all.
Just as I thought it was going all right, I found out I'm wrong and I thought I was right.
And that's all by Genesis, but not quite. We'll come back and say goodbye to the gentleman in just a moment. I'm Bob Coburn, and you're listening to Rockline.
I must have dreamed 1,000 dreams.
And once again, welcome back to Rockline. I'm BC, Bob Coburn, Mike Rutherford, Tony Banks. Thanks for taking the time to sit down and talk about this project. It's an outstanding project. I enjoy hearing these songs done live. The studio versions are kind of imprinted in my mind, but to hear them remastered and retooled and to sound this outstanding, it's a great project, and I'm glad you did this. Thank you very much for it.
Well, thank you.
Pleasure. And once again, nice talking to you over all these years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been way
The
too
face
long.
and the name we've seen a lot of.
We're out of time. We're done. I'm BC, and I'll be seeing you. Rockline has been brought to you by The Simpsons on Fox. Rockline is produced by Greg Jernigan and mixed by Jimmy Rash. Thanks to Chris Martin and David Brown for their invaluable contributions. And to Jamie Sutton and Valley Sound Studios, the home of Rockline. I'm Bob Coburn, and I'll be seeing you.